Welcome, 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 welcome. Welcome back to another live with Brittany. Hey, you're a manifesting mentor. I am not a coach. I'm not a guru. I'm a woman who demonstrates this work every single day, and I help others to do the same so that you can live the life or they life they truly deserve and desire and that they are aligned with. I'm so glad you're here. It's a Friday night. You could be anywhere in the world doing anything you want to be doing. I'm actually supposed to have been somewhere, but plans got canceled due to weather. So it actually gave me an excuse to do what I was scheduled to do anyway, which is be here live with you every Friday and every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. So I love that I've been able to keep my commitment. And we are going on the seventh chapter after this. So shout out to me for being consistent. That's a big deal, y'all. It's a big, big deal. But if you're new here, I've been walking through Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza. I've been going chapter by chapter. I've been going live twice a week, as I mentioned, reading it with you, applying the information to my life every single day, and showing what happens when you truly embody the teachings. Okay, so tonight we're going to finish up chapter 6. These are case studies, examples of living truth. And we'll be diving into stories of Jennifer and Felicia. These are two women who show us what's possible when you stop carrying the emotional weight of your past and start practicing the frequency of worthiness, aka receivership. And that is sometimes often easier said than done because if you reflect on these stories that we're going to talk about tonight, these women have been through some things, okay? And when you are living in this reality and you're dealing with this life through the five senses, because that's all we really know, that's the conditioning, right? To believe your five senses more than anything else. Well, this work is teaching you the opposite of that. It's teaching us to recondition our bodies to a new mind where we can tune into things that our five senses can't yet pick up, but we can on a soul level through our imagination, through our inner exploration, through tapping into the unified field, the quantum, and realizing that in this realm, there are infinite potentials, infinite possibilities that exist, but we only are able to tune into the ones that we can see for ourselves in not just in vision, but that we can emotionally allow ourselves to express or embrace. When we can allow ourselves to embrace the emotion of the vision that we have for ourselves, that is what sends the signal that we are ready to receive from the universe. And I equate that to worthiness. And for a lot of us, we've grown up with complexes about worthiness, sometimes to succeed our way to being worthy, or we have to perform our way into being worthy or prove ourselves worthy. And this work is literally helping us to unpack that and undo a lot of that conditioning because to the divine, to the creator of all worlds and all things in all worlds, we are worthy because we are. We are an extension of the divine. And so we don't have to prove ourselves worthy. But enough about that. That's a whole nother topic, but I think it ties into all of these stories that we've heard about in chapter 6. But as usual, I'm going to share some of my notes from each part. Part 3 goes over Jennifer's story, and it's titled Jennifer in Sickness and in Health. And that phrase sounds familiar because it reminds you of marital nuptials. In sickness and in health till death do us part is how it goes in the Bible. If I'm not mistaken, when people get married and the person who marries them off, usually the pastor or the religious person who helps them cement their vows. I'm not religious in that way, so I don't really know the names of these people. But they usually say that line: in sickness and in health till death do us part. And Jennifer's story is deeply rooted not just in her suffering over the years with multiple illnesses or chronic conditions, but it's also deeply rooted in her spouse. Yeah, and we'll get into that. So Jennifer had suffered for years with multiple chronic conditions. She had everything from digestive issues, kidney disease, she had asthma, she had a number of things that I couldn't even pronounce. She had arthritis, vertigo, and she had some. I think her vertigo was so acute that it often resulted in vomiting. She was just the kind of woman who had been through a lot physically, health wise. And she said the hardest thing that she had to deal with was that she felt like a terrible mother because she couldn't do anything with her children because she was always sick. She said, and that broke her heart. So she felt really inadequate as a parent. And I'm probably going to guess that she probably felt the same in terms of her husband because she was a wife as well. But she didn't allow any of that to stop her from her healing. And we talk about this. Um, Part of what happened with her is that her husband was the one who discovered Dr. Joe's work after witnessing her ongoing pain for years and years and years. And what she explained, or what they explained about her story, is that she kind of felt like she was not going to be around for a long time because she had so many chronic illnesses. And I wouldn't say that she was necessarily suicidal, but she kind of had checked out in the sense that she was like mentally preparing to not be around. And her husband he didn't follow her lead. And that was her biggest blessing, right? Because sometimes when you are going through things, the people around you, they can pick up on your feeling like you're being discouraged or you don't really want to, you know, I won't even say that you don't want to, because when a person is ill, it's a very different space to be in. But feeling as if you are checking out of your daily life in a sense, like I don't know the word, and I'm usually not lost for words. Like you're retreating, not retreating. I don't know the word I'm looking for, but it's almost like when you kind of give up on thinking or feeling like things are going to get better for yourself. I don't know the word for that. But if you know the word for that, drop that in the comments because I need that. But anyway, so her husband was the one who he saw his wife struggling, her man, my man, saw her struggling and did not give up on his wife. And he looked up alternative solutions, found Dr. Joe's work, and wanted her to attend a workshop. And she still, even though she had gotten Dr. Joe's work, there were more and more health issues that were happening in the background. And it says the real breakthrough began when she started to shift emotionally during one of the meditations when she made it to a workshop of Dr. Joe's. She stopped focusing on what was wrong with her body in this meditation because she had to pull herself out of managing symptoms all the time and really be in the meditation. And he had a part where he told them to tune into the potential where the problem doesn't exist. And that means she had to turn off all of her senses to what was wrong in her body at that time. And she had to tune in to the version of her that could experience health. And for whatever reason, she had a breakthrough in this meditation to the point where it brought her to tears. And she started reconnecting with a sense of wholeness internally. And that wholeness, that feeling is what allowed her to overcome herself day after day, even after the workshop. And so Dr. Joe explains that eventually she was able to recondition her body to a new mind to the point where she no longer had the symptoms that she used to have. She was able to eat whatever food she wanted to eat. This is a person that's coming from things like celiac disease and other digestive issues to being able to eat whatever she wanted to eat. She had asthma so bad that she could not run. And if she did things like lift her arms, it would trigger asthma. Like they said that she was so out of energy and so, just not able to really take care of herself that it was difficult to even brush her teeth. So from someone going from all of those extreme conditions and symptoms to being able to eat what she wants, not only that, she was able to run. Not only that, she started weight training. This was someone who couldn't even lift her arms to brush her teeth. She started weight training. And then by the end of her section of that story, her section of the chapter, she talked about how she wanted to train for a marathon. A marathon. That's how much she reconditioned her body to a new mind. So it was like when she stopped focusing on what was wrong with her body and started reconnecting with a sense of wholeness internally, that's when her symptoms actually started to disappear. And it didn't happen overnight. It wasn't just a one off meditation and then she was healed. It said eventually, which means that she still had to maintain her life from that workshop on. But fast forward, she said she hadn't used an inhaler. I think what year? Did they mention the year? She mentioned the year, but I don't know. It's not, you're not able to tell how many years have gone by since she wasn't able to, didn't have to use an inhaler. But yeah, her story was really profoundly touching, right? Because yet again, she's an example of the 4 minute mile. Once you see a glimpse of possibility, you start to believe that it's possible for you. And that's why I love Dr. Joe's books with these stories of transformation and case studies. But also, that's why I love his YouTube channel with the stories of transformation, because to this day, that gets me through a lot. So I personally had some moments this week that I shared about in my last live on Tuesday, where I felt like things that I'm manifesting wasn't showing up fast enough. And, reading these stories from Felicia and Jennifer, which we'll get into Felicia's next, but realizing these stories of what these women had to go through every day and having to overcome themselves every single day. The old version of me wanted to jump in and to take action and to control the outcome, to fix it, to force it, because I didn't see it happening, right? These women stopped focusing on what they didn't see and started focusing on what they wanted to see and hear. They started shifting their emotions to embrace the feelings of being healed. They started practicing, rehearsing what it would be like to be healed. They started stretching their imagination for possibility of a life where they no longer had to deal with the illnesses. So reading Jennifer's story reminded me of that, like I don't have to force anything, right? Because whether you're healing energetically or emotionally or physically, um, that doesn't require force. It comes from trust. It comes from emotional regulation, a whole lot of emotional regulation. And I mean, if I'm going to talk about emotional regulation, it's not just breathing, it's not just meditating. Sometimes it's letting yourself cry. I had to do that. I had to do that this week. I had to let myself cry through my frustration. I had to let myself cry through my disappointment, through, just feeling like in moments that things weren't working for me. But I know that voice, that feeling was just rooted in my past memories of disappointment, my past memories of not getting things that I wanted to have, or my past memories of feeling like maybe I'm not doing something right, you know? So when you consider emotional regulation, I really want you to take an inventory of what that means for you. Yes, it's breathing through it. Sometimes it is, sitting through a meditation, doing some breath work, but it's also crying. Tears are healing. So let yourself cry, because for me, the whole point is not to suppress and it's not to bypass, right? Part of why we have so many issues is because we don't give ourselves the space to actually feel the feelings that we feel. We judge ourselves for thinking what we think. We judge ourselves for feeling what we feel, or we try to suppress it. Some of us medicate it. Some of us, use other things, substances, to avoid feeling feelings. But I think it's really healthy when you can allow yourself the space to regulate, not just through breathing and meditating, but through tears. If you need to cry, get it out of your body. One good, ugly cry does the body good, I promise you. So it helped me remember that I don't have to perform or prove to be worthy of receiving. And that's what Jennifer's story kind of, how it unfolded for her. She realized she didn't have to perform or prove. She just started to allow herself to see into the future of what it could be like to live well, to live without disease in her body, which was hard because every day she had about 10 or 11 different chronic illnesses going on. And sometimes the deepest miracle is when you choose to feel whole even before the thing happens. Like we know this every time we see stories of people overcoming things that are far more difficult than what we have to deal with. We're always like, wow, like that's a miracle. That's amazing. Because we know this life can get tough. And you thought what you had going on was tough until you see the next person's story. And it's like, oh, they made it through that. That's a miracle. Yes, it is. You are a miracle. So, also, what I didn't jot down here was I talked about it a little bit, but Jennifer, her story was also very inspiring because of her husband, Jim. Let's talk about Jim for a moment. Jim is that guy because he believed in his wife's healing, even through the moments where she wasn't believing for herself. Dr. Joe explained that Jennifer started checking out in the sense that she didn't feel like she was going to live long. But lo and behold, Jim starts looking up alternative solutions and he finds Dr. Joe's work. You Are the Placebo is the book that he started reading. And he learned about a workshop. And Homeboy was like, not on my watch. My wife is, I'm going to find some solutions for her. And I just think that that is so beautiful to have the kind of union where, this man, like he could have checked out just like his wife checked out because being a caregiver is not easy. But instead of checking out, he looked for solutions and he was her ride, literally her ride or die. And he found it and she found her healing. And I think a major part of that, well, obviously, Dr. Joe named the chapter, the section of the chapter, Jennifer in Sickness and in Health, because that marriage, who she married, who her life partner was, is actually a great catalyst for her transformation. And I think it's so beautiful that this story was included because it could be a great example of what it means to believe on behalf of someone else that you love, especially if it's your spouse. I actually, have a family. In my family, a few of my family members have lost their significant other to illness, and they were the main caregivers for their loved one. And I was able to witness how beautiful that unfolded for them, because when one wasn't well, the other was there to literally be what they couldn't be for themselves. And may we all find or have or maintain or grow into that kind of divine union where when life gets tough, you have your person that you can get through these things with. And shout out to Jennifer and Jim. That was awesome. Love that story. Someone did ask a question though before I go on another tangent. How did Jennifer begin to feel better before her body changed? Jennifer, um, well, from what the story shares, she got to this workshop and sitting through meditations was pretty much difficult, right? Like it says the first night she could hardly make it up to the stairs of her room, but by the end of the workshop, she was walking around like a healthy person and didn't have to use her asthma medication. So, I think she was able to get through it just incrementally. She wasn't trying to identify with her diagnosis anymore. She was trying to really tune into the version of her that could actually be well. So she shifted her focus from the symptoms or managing symptoms to emotional alignment. And that's when her energy changed and her body basically followed. And excuse me for a second. That's literally the premise of this work is when you change internally, when you change your frequency, the signal that you're sending with basically your electromagnetic signal, your aura, your emotional signature, the way you exist, when you change that, then things have to change externally or physically because the universe does this thing where everything is in balance and like attracts like. And so you are in resonance with a particular signature. And so when she changed her signature, things had to change. That's how this works. So I hope that I answered that question. I think I understood it enough to answer that question. Second question, someone asked, what have you been supporting others so long that you forgot how to support yourself? Ooh. Okay, so I don't know who asked this question. I can't tell from the person that submitted the question if they are a patient, meaning someone who is dealing with illness themselves, or if they are a caregiver. What if you've been supporting others so long that you forgot how to support yourself? So I work in a field where I work with a lot of patients and I work with also caregivers. So I'm not really clear on who's asking this question, but I would say this. Whether you're a patient or a caregiver, if you're managing your own diagnosis or someone else's, you're caring for a loved one. Jennifer's story is really a good story to go to because her healing journey didn't begin with doing more, right? Like she didn't have to do more for others. It began when she gave herself permission to reconnect with her own life force. So, in Becoming Supernatural, Dr. Joe teaches that when we live in survival for too long, we become addicted to stress chemistry, stress chemicals. Like our bodies are addicted to cortisol, and what's the other one? Cortisol and adrenaline. And so that applies to caregivers too. Her husband, Jim, they don't talk a lot about what he was going through emotionally, but I could only imagine, because again, his wife had some serious chronic illnesses, kidney disease, asthma. She had something called Jorgen's syndrome with Sicca complex, vertigo. She had arthritis, chronic asthma, celiac, other digestive issues. So I could only imagine, they had children too, by the way. I could only imagine his emotions. So, constantly giving, constantly bracing, constantly managing other people's needs can pull you out of alignment, pull you out of balance, and out of your own emotional truth. A lot of times you don't even get to face your own emotional truth because you're so concerned about the person that you have to care for. And you down because they're already fighting for their lives or whatever they're dealing with. So I think that the moment that, for example, with Jennifer, the moment that she shifted her energy inward, not out of guilt, but out of remembrance, that's when her field began to shift. That's when she started to see, her symptoms dwindle to the point where she talked about the day before not being able to go up the stairs, but then walk, losing her breath really quickly, walking to her room to being fine. By the end of the chapter or that section, she was running marathons. She couldn't even lift her arm to brush her teeth. But by the end of the chapter, she was weight training and wanting to train for a marathon. Like that says everything. And if you're a caregiver who feels like you've lost yourself, or a patient who feels like healing has become your whole identity, then let Jennifer remind you. Like healing doesn't mean abandoning others. It means you're including yourself in the love that you give away. I love that, by the way. You are including yourself in the love that you give away. So whatever you're pouring into another, just remember to reflect some of that back to you. If you're being considerate of another's feelings, be considerate of your own. If you're being considerate of, someone, your loved one that you're giving care for, excuse me, being dysregulated in their nervous system, be considerate of your own nervous system. Don't engage in that argument if it's gonna dysregulate you and them. Be considerate of you. So when you do that, I feel like life will mirror that back to you. It'll give you back that balance, that peace, that restoration. Um, because it is easy to get lost in the labels. It's like easy to get lost in caring for other people. It's easy to forget you. But this work brings you back to that. It gives you the foundation. As I like to say, my cup runneth over. Whatever I do for me, it's filling my cup up. So I fill my cup up, and what runneth over is for the world, and what's in my cup is for me. So make sure if you fill your cup up to the point where it's running over, so you have not just enough for yourself, but enough to give other people as well. And I hope that answers your question. So I have a few people that joined us. Don't be shy. Say hi in the comments. Tell me where you're joining from. Um, Tell me where you're joining from. I'm going to get ready to get into Felicia's story. Felicia's story is personal because what she struggled with is something that I also struggled with for most of my childhood and still some of my adult life. Eczema. She healed her chronic eczema. And if you know anybody with eczema, you know that that is a very, it makes you self-conscious in certain ways, obviously, because it's a skin issue. And I, as a little girl, I had it over a good portion of my body. So I know exactly what, even though Dr. Joe didn't touch on everything, I know exactly what Felicia had to grow through to overcome herself, because parts of me is still overcoming those parts of myself. And I don't even have eczema as severely as I used to. But I'll get into Felicia's story next. So Felicia, let's see, Felicia overcame severe eczema. Okay. So Felicia, it says that her eczema wasn't just painful, and it was emotionally devastating. And like I said, I know exactly what that is, because eczema, not only does it itch, sometimes you end up scratching sores. So you're itchy, you know, you scratch sores on yourself, and it ends up it being in places that you don't want people to see. When I was a kid, I had it on the back of my legs, all over my legs, and kids would tease me, "What's on your skin?" And so she felt very embarrassed. I felt embarrassed too. She was embarrassed to be seen. She was ashamed of how her body looked. Been there. But when she started doing the work, she focused on not fighting her body, but on blessing it. And that's where she started to see her breakthrough happen. But she began to see herself as someone who was worthy of love, of beauty, of being visible, and of peace. And that's when I believe her healing truly began for her. So, you know, some of my reflections, as I mentioned, I had to grow through a lot of this myself. And thankfully for me, a lot of my eczema issues subsided by the time I got to like middle school. So, you know, the beginning phases of it, I was too young to fully understand. By the time I started elementary school and parts of middle school, I started to understand, because kids can be cruel. I had no concept. I knew my skin was itchy, but I had no concept of how bad it was until a kid told me, "Ew, like, what's that on her legs? Yuck." And kids will make you feel real bad. So, um, hi, Pierre. How are you? Welcome, welcome, welcome. But yeah, kids will make you feel really bad. And so, um, I could identify with how she felt, feeling like you have to get it all together before you show up. You got to hide the parts you don't want people to see. Um, I love that. Pierre says, "I'm perfect." And you, I am well, Pierre. I had a interesting week, but I am well, thankfully. And I'm here showing up because I've committed to this series. And I'm so glad you're here. But yeah, so for Felicia, you know, it reminds us that visibility is also part of healing, because she wanted to hide from the things that she didn't want the world to see or judge. So, you know, her being okay with being visible was a part of her healing. I had to remind myself of that lately too, that I don't have to wait for the manifestation to arrive to embody the woman that I'm becoming. I just show up. If I show up in energy, emotionally, and in some of my thoughts, obviously, that I don't have to stay hidden until everything looks perfect. I started this journey here. I don't have a whole lot of followers. I don't have it all together. Like, even me doing this series was partly me winging it. I'm like, oh, I want to read a book, and you know, people resonate with some of the things I'm talking about anyway. Let me just try it. And so I'm okay with being seen even in my imperfection. I show up with no makeup. I'm the daughter of a hairstylist, and I show up with no makeup. Um, and you couldn't get me to do that years ago. But I realized I'm worthy. Like, bless my nervous system, and I get back into, you know, regulation after being triggered by certain things. Yeah, it's called self confidence, Pierre, but I also call it just resilience, because I'm not always confident. Sometimes I do it scared. Sometimes I do it nervous. Sometimes I do it insecure. You'd be amazed. By the time I stick a camera in my face, you'd have no clue of the emotions I've had to drag myself through just to get to that point of saying, okay, hit record. To even jump on this live tonight, I'm like, ugh. But I started showing up on camera without makeup because I'm like, I'm a real person. Like I'm regular just like anybody else. And I don't want to be performative. I don't want to get on camera and act like I gotta perform for people to watch me or for people to like me. Like I think I'm pretty relatable as I am. So that whole embodiment series that I've been doing. Ah, thank you. All natural Virgo 44. You're doing awesome. I'm having a great time. I am so appreciative that you're having a great time. That's why I show up. Like I show up because you never know, who can benefit from what you have to share. And I encourage every single one of you on this live, start showing up more, start being more visible because the fact that you're into this kind of work, that you think in this kind of way, this world needs a lot more of that. But the problem is so many of us go into hiding. We read these books, we consume this kind of information. We're really into transformation, personal transformation, and personal development. But a lot of us aren't visible enough. And so I know that, I kind of felt hidden for a while and I wanted to show up because, when other people show up doing similar, I got plenty of teachers that I learned from that are on social media, that are on YouTube. And I'm so grateful that they show up because they're making a difference in my life. So I'm glad you're enjoying yourself. Tell me, what part are you enjoying? You say you're having a great time, all natural Virgo 44. What part are you enjoying? Pierre says, just a step by step process. Keep doing it. That's all you could do, Pierre. I'm trying. I am definitely trying. Um, but yeah, I did get a few questions from chapter 6, part 4, which is Felicia's story, curing her severe eczema. This person says, how can I feel confident when my body still feels broken? Ooh, how can I feel confident when my body still feels broken? Start by treating your body like it's already whole because our bodies go through so much. Our bodies are our best friend. Every single thing we go through emotionally, guess what's taking the first hit? Your body. When you eat something or consume something that's not the best for the body, guess what takes the hit? The body. Like our bodies go through so much. So just bless it, knowing that it's already whole. Speak to it with love, be kind, be gentle. Our bodies run on autopilot. We don't have to think about our hearts beating. We don't have to think about when we get a cut and it bleeds and the scab forms and it eventually heals. We don't have to think about that. Our bodies do that naturally, and that's a blessing. So we have to remember to speak to our bodies with love and kindness and let it know that you're not lying to yourself. You're training your system to expect peace instead of pain. You know, we have to remember that we don't need to take our bodies for granted because all the tangible things we think we want in life, we don't get to enjoy them without this vessel. So, really just understand that, be gentle with yourself, show a lot of grace for yourself. You didn't get the way that you are overnight. And so, even healing can take time. So, just be gentle with yourself, be patient, be kind. I hope that helps. And someone else asked a question. What's one practice Felicia used that we can apply today? Well, from what Dr. Joe shared, she practiced elevated emotions often. She was obviously doing the work. Yes, the body is memory. Yeah, Dr. Joe says that, Pierre. He says that the body is the subconscious mind. It becomes a subconscious mind because it runs on autopilot. Everything that I listed that the body does, the autonomic nervous system, it doesn't require our thinking. So it does become, it has its own memory and it runs our lives when we don't understand that it's doing that. But yeah, so Felicia, she practiced elevated emotions. He said she was doing the work, especially love and self acceptance. And you can start by visualizing, visualize your future self being well, feeling free. Because I say freedom, visualize yourself feeling a sense of freedom because freedom is what we all think we're going to feel when we're on the other side of that problem. So when you're not experiencing healing, freedom is what you want. You want the freedom to feel like you don't have to think about managing your symptoms or whatever you're going through. Focus on freedom. Whether even if it's not health, if it was a job or something that you were trying to manifest, a new job, the ultimate feeling you're after is a sense of more freedom. Let's say you wanted to make more money. Why do you want more money? Because somewhere deep down inside you think that money is going to give you more freedom. Love for life. Yep. You think that what you're really after is a sense of freedom. So if you can tune into the frequency of what it feels like to feel free, even if it's imagining that whatever problem is before you is no longer in existence, that's enough to give you instant relief. If you just think about, I'm on the other side of this problem, everything is resolved, I have everything I need, I feel no more pain, there's no more symptoms, I don't have to worry about the medication anymore. What does that look like? How do you live? How do you walk? How do you talk? How do you love? You know, be in that emotion now. And that's what Felicia had to practice. The elevated emotions before her skin started looking better. You know, that's what you want to learn how to practice through this work. And that's really what I'm actually being held accountable for doing as I do this series. Because every time I read another chapter, I realize my why I'm doing it. It reinvigorates my conviction for doing this work. It reinforces everything that I show up and share on TikTok and on YouTube. It just helps me be better in tune with people that might join me on live, that might leave a comment on my video. I'm able to be more rooted in the work to really be of service or help to other people as they're navigating their own journey. So, I get to show up before things are perfect in my world as well. But I'm very grateful for that. So both of these women's stories prove that the field doesn't respond to suffering. So they didn't heal because they allowed themselves to linger in the suffering. They healed because they allowed themselves to tune into the frequency of the version of them that's already healed. They tuned into the frequency of the elevated emotions of being free from whatever ailments they had. Pierre says, I trust those information because I was sick and now I'm in perfect health. Amen. I've been through that too. I've had to overcome some health issues while practicing this work myself, and I'm still overcoming certain aspects of it. But I have no doubt that this work works, or I wouldn't show up here. I don't co-sign much. To know me is to know. Like if I'm co-signing anything, I really believe in it. It takes a lot for me to co-sign anything. I don't talk about things that I don't understand publicly. Like I'm that person. Like I try to move with a sense of like, do I have a knowing for this or am I just talking out of my neck? I don't like to be the person that talks out of my neck. I like to feel like I'm rooted in something. I really believe in what I'm sharing, especially if I'm sharing. Oh my God. Because God forbid I share something and then you guys are like, oh my God, that was awful. Brittany told me to do that. Listen, I don't like that. So I tend to share from a space of inner conviction. And I will say I've been doing this work with Dr. Joe and his teachings for about 5 years. I've witnessed miracles in my own life. I've witnessed miracles that I've helped perform on behalf of people that I love. When you talk about coherence healings, we'll get into that later in the book. But those are real and they work. The Heart Math Institute teaches about heart and brain coherence, and it's a very powerful practice. It's at the core of Dr. Joe's teaching. So, yes. But back to what I was saying, the field doesn't respond to suffering, it responds to signal. And that signal is built on worthiness. When you feel worthy enough to receive what it is you are tuning into with elevated emotions. And the only way to get to me, the only way to get to feeling worthy is by practicing the emotion. Because the emotion is foreign unless you give your body a taste of it. And that's what we're doing in meditation. So it's not about being perfect. It's not about being perfect and it's not about performance. It's about worthiness. So once you decide to stop rehearsing the version of you who feels like they have to earn it, and you start aligning with the version of you who already belongs to the breakthrough, then the field will recognize you. It will see your signal. It will say, yes, you feel worthy. Here you go. I got to match that. And once you've seen that it's possible for others, you stop doubting, you start preparing because Joe says this all the time. The reason he shares these stories, not just in his books, But on his channel, The Stories of Transformation, is because once you see a glimmer of possibility, the way our human minds work is that we start to believe in possibility. If you never see something before we had airplanes, people never believed that we could fly like birds. It took for the Wright brothers to believe that we could fly like birds, and everybody in their life to think that they were ape shit crazy for believing that we could fly like birds, for them to come up with the airplane. And lo and behold, today is one of the main means of travel. So you stop doubting, you start preparing mentally, emotionally, physically, because the 4 minute mile effect is real, y'all. Once someone breaks it, we can all break it. And your time is coming. It's coming. Stay in the work, stay in the frequency. You're not broken. You are already becoming supernatural. Pierre says the field is everything. Yes, it is, Pierre. We swimming in it all day long. We are swimming in the field. And part of what I love about Joe's meditations is that it gets you to tune into something that you don't even consider as you're moving through your day. We have no clue about the field as we're moving through our day if we're not taught about this stuff and when we're not conditioning and training ourselves to tune into it. There's an invisible field of possibility that we exist within and all around us. And when we learn how to tune into it, when we understand that we're not separate from it, things happen, miraculous things. Or as Dr. Joe would say, supernatural things. Our ancestors knew this stuff, by the way. Joe is giving the scientific cosign to things that our ancestors have always known. You know, if you come from, I'm talking about worldly cultures of different people from different, spiritual practices. Joe is just putting science behind these things, these concepts. The energy centers are chakras. We learned about that from a lot of the Eastern spiritualists. They do a lot with the chakras and breath work. Like none of this stuff is new under the sun. But I have so much respect for Joe because once again, he's helping us to demystify the mystical. If you ever doubted the teachings that you might have learned from whatever religious background you might come from, when you start getting into Joe's teachings, you start to understand that our ancestors knew without knowing. They knew without knowing. And because we know so much, our analytical minds are always like thinking, overthinking. So science is for people like, who have very analytical minds. And so it's not enough for them to pray. They want to know how does prayer work? They don't just want to know how to meditate and trust and believe that it's powerful. They want to know what's happening with my body scientifically as I meditate. Shout out to Joe because he's helping us understand that. But he was also, believing before he understood it. And then he decided to reverse engineer and give us the scientific data behind everything we've been practicing for since our human existence. Yep. Pierre says everything is interconnected. Yes, Pierre, everything is connected, Pierre. We're not separate. We're not separate from our source. We're not separate from our planet. We're not separate from each other. And the quicker we realize that, the better off we'll be. But yeah, this has been fun a Friday night. It's been fun. It's been real. I don't know if you guys have plans for this weekend. It's a holiday. I don't know when you're watching this, but it's a holiday weekend. I hope you guys enjoy yourselves as you're doing the work and reading and learning and growing. Um, But if we have no more questions or comments, I want to wish you a wonderful weekend ahead. I want to thank you for showing up for yourselves, Pat yourself on the back because this is big. I tell people all the time spiritual work, inner work, personal transformation is not for the weak. It's not for the weak. It's not for the person who doesn't want to feel. It's not for the person who doesn't want to take accountability. It's not for the person who just wants a quick fix. And because you keep showing up for yourself, listen, you are changing the world more than you know. Michael Jackson told us if you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make the change. I see no lies in that statement. And people like Dr. Joe is making the change a lot more tangible, a lot more possible, and helping us remember our supernatural abilities. And I'm grateful. And I don't know who needs to hear this, but this is your reminder. And you got this. And until next time, guys, I'll see you in my next live on Tuesday. We're going to be on chapter 7, Heart Intelligence, is what we're going to go over. Till next time, bye, guys.